Hello and welcome to the lesson on transposition review. So I'm just going to give you a few examples where I'll talk you through them, and then after that you can probably turn the volume down and just, if you want to, you can just look at my answer, or you can watch me slowly work it out but without commentary. Rightio. So let's start with rearranging this formula. So what we're asked to do is rearrange the formulas so that the indicated letter becomes the subject. So the first question is A equals pi RL. We want to make R the subject. So try to think. R is here. It's been multiplied by pi and by L. So in order to make R the subject, we would need to go R equals, or don't need to change it to pi RL equals A. You can if you want, but you don't have to. I'll show you how you can do it without having to necessarily change sides. So A equals pi RL. So to find R by itself, we'll need to divide both sides by pi and by L. So you can just leave it in the same order. A divided by pi L equals R. Right, and so then that one has been solved. I'll just rewrite it so that's sort of more in the middle. So A over pi L equals R. Sydney, quickly, come on, in and out. Next one, we've got V equals U plus AT. What we're asked to do is to make U the subject. So where is U in the whole equation? U is here. So in order to get U by itself, we'll need to subtract this from both sides because it's been added. So to get U by itself, we'll need to subtract both sides by AT. So again, I'm not going to, you can swap it around. You could go U plus AT equals V if you want, but you don't have to. So again, I'm going to show you how you can transpose the formula to make U the subject without swapping the sides around, just to show you that it's possible. So we need to subtract both sides by AT. So we can just go V minus AT equals U. That's the same thing. So same thing as saying U equals V minus AT. So we've subtracted AT from this side, and we've subtracted AT from this side as well. So that one's actually been finished. Now we've got the same equation. You might notice that these kind of look like familiar equations, like you might have seen them in science, like physics lessons. So we've got acceleration, speed, initial speed, final velocity, that kind of thing, and time. So here we're asked to make A the subject using the same equation as before. So the velocity equation, and so we've got to make A the subject. So to make A the subject, you've got to, first of all, you need to subtract U from both sides, and then you need to divide off the T. So you need to circle these in your working out. That's just me pointing it out the order I'm going to do it in. Again, you can swap the sides around first if you want, but I'm not going to do that. So first step, we need to subtract U from both sides. So this is going to take a few steps this time. So V minus U equals AT. So we subtracted U from both sides. Now to get A by itself, we now need to divide both sides by T. So now I'm going to do that in the next line. V minus U all over T equals A. And then that one's been done. Excellent. So the next one we're going to do is V equals a third pi r squared h. So try to think that's the volume of what particular shape? Have a guess? That's right, it's a cone. This happens to be, question 4 happens to be the volume of a cone formula. You've got the volume of a cylinder, and also because it's a tapered object, that's why you have a third. Tapered meaning it goes to a point. So volume of a cone, but we need to make h the subject because that's what the question's asking. So to make h the subject, we've got to do a number of things. We've got to divide off pi r squared, and we also need to divide off the 3. So we divide off 1/3. So I'm going to divide off 1/3 first, just to make life a bit easier for myself. Remember, dividing by a third is the same as multiplying by 3 over 1. Because remember, keep, change, flip. So divide by a third is the same as timesing by 3 over 1. Makes sense too, because first of all times by the 3, and then divide off the 1. And so times by 3 over 1, volume times 3 over 1. So it goes like this, volume times 3 over 1 will just be 3v over 1 which is just 3v. So volume divided by a third is the same as saying 3v. So I'm going to do it in a step. I'm going to deal with the fraction first. So dividing by a third is the same as timesing by 3 over 1 equals pi r squared h. And then just try to remember what they want us to find this as the subject. They want us to find h as the subject. So now what's lucky is we only need to divide up the pi r squared now. So that's easy enough to do. So we can go 3v over pi r squared, divide both sides by pi r squared, leaves you with h. Again, you can write h equals 3v over pi r squared as well. That's also okay. I'm just showing you that you don't have to swap the sides around if you don't want. Okay, another famous equation, where have you seen this before? That's right, that's Einstein's equation. E equals mc squared. M is the mass, c is the speed of light. Energy equals mc squared. So, what were we asked to find the subject? We're asked to find m. Okay, that one, m as the subject. So to find m as a subject, it's pretty easy. We just need to divide off this thingy here. So divide both sides by c squared. We can go e over c squared. Then we can divide the right side by c squared. We'll get m. Same thing, you could write m equals e over c squared. That's also totally fine. So not too many steps in the ones on this page, but on the next page there might be some more. So we're asked to find, we've got y equals 4x plus 3. We're asked to make x the subject. So y equals 4x plus 3. Try to think which one we have to deal with first, the 4 or the 3. And that's right, we should deal with the 4 first. What am I saying? Sorry, I'm looking at the time instead. I'll just try and minimize that. So we need to deal with the 3 first, sorry. So deal with the 3 first, and then deal with the 4 afterwards. So to deal with the 3, it's plus 3. So how do we deal with the 3? We need to eliminate it by subtracting 3 from both sides. So let's show that. Y minus 3 equals 4x. Because when you subtract 3 from this side, they cancel out. So you can show that part that I just did there if you want, but you don't have to. So y minus 3 equals 4x. To find x by itself, we need to divide both sides by 4. You would probably agree. So y minus 3 over 4 equals x. Again, you can write x equals y minus 3 over 4. You could also write y over 4 minus 3/4 equals x, because you can break up the numerator. So all of those answers are correct. Next one, number 7, y equals x over 5 plus 3. What do they want us to make the subject? X. So do we deal with the 5 first or the 3? Have a think. That's right, you would have to deal with the 3 first. So to deal with the 3, do you agree again that we need to subtract 3 from both sides? So similar to the last one, y minus 3 equals x over 5. And now to deal with the x, to deal with the 5, sorry. We'll try to think what we would have to do, because it's divide by 5 at the moment. That's right, we would need to multiply both sides by 5. So try to think, to multiply both sides by 5, would you write y minus 3 times 5? That's correct, you would not do that, because according to BEDMAS, only the 3 would have been multiplied by the 5. So instead you need to pop 5 out the front and use brackets to indicate that all of y minus 3 has been multiplied by 5. So that is perfectly fine as an answer. You could also write 5y minus 15 equals x, which would have been the case if I expanded that bracket. 5y minus 15 equals x. You could also write x equals 5y minus 15, or just swap the sides around if you like. But that's okay, what we've got there. You might find on the answer sheet they have something slightly different. Let's check the answer sheet. Yep, they say this, x equals 5 brackets y minus 3 close brackets, or x equals 5y minus 15. Both are okay. And so see how I've got it, my side I've got the x on the right, but it's okay if you swap it around and go x equals instead. A lot of people prefer to do that. Okay, so the next one, question 8. We're asked to make x the subject. So y equals x plus 3 over 5. Do we deal with the 3 or the 5 first? Have a think first. We deal with the 5, because all of x plus 3 is all over 5. So we need to, therefore, multiply both sides by 5 first. So multiplying both sides by 5, do I write y times 5? That's correct, we don't do that. Instead, we use proper algebra notation and we go 5y equals x plus 3. 5y equals x plus 3. And then what you can do is try to think how you would deal with the 3. That's correct, you would subtract it from both sides. So we can go 5y minus 3 equals x. As I've been saying, you can also just write it like this if you prefer. Some people like to have the subject on the left. That's okay. You might notice in the answers they always seem to have the subject on the left. So if you want to find it easier to correct your work, feel free to start doing that. And that one's finished. We've made x the subject. Another fractiony one, we want to make h the subject. This one here. So I personally might do this prefer to do it in 2 steps because I'm going to deal with the fraction first. So remember, to deal with a fraction, we need to divide both sides by a half. And remembering dividing by a half is the same as timesing by 2 over 1. So it makes sense. Multiply off the 2, then divide off the 1. So a times 2 over 1 would simply become, that's correct, 2a. 2a equals bh. So do it in 1 step like that first. And then to make h the subject, what would you do to get rid of the b? That's correct, you would divide both sides by b. So 2a over b equals h. And then you can also, in your final step, you could write this h equals 2a over b. Make sure if it's uppercase a, make sure you use uppercase a. And if it's lowercase b, make sure you use lowercase b. If you change it to uppercase b, your answer is actually wrong, because uppercase b is a different variable to lowercase b. So please make sure you've got your variables in the correct case. Now the famous equation again, we saw it before, E equals mc squared. But what's different about this question? That's right, they want us to find c. So do we deal with the square first, or do we deal with the m? Have a think. That's correct, we need to deal with the m first. So divide both sides by m is our first step. So please, definitely I would suggest do things in 2 separate steps. C squared. And then to get c by itself, how do we deal with the square? I think. That's right, we would have to square root. Square root e over m equals c. Remember, when you square root something, you have a positive and a negative answer. So it can depend on the context. In this case, in the answers, you'll have found they don't have plus and minus out the front. And that's probably because of the context of the question. Can we get negative speed of light? I suppose depending on the situation you're talking about, a theoretical or a real life situation, we wouldn't necessarily get a negative speed of light. So that's potentially why they didn't bother to put the plus and minus in the answer. So you can also swap it around if you prefer and go e over m square root. Make sure the square root goes over the whole of e and m. The wrong way to do this is to do that, because that means only the e has been square rooted, not the entire fraction e over m has been square rooted. So please make sure you write it in the way that I have, where the square root clearly goes over e and m, and that you use uppercase e and lowercase m, because that's what the question had in it. There's still more to go. Feel free to turn me down now if you like, turn my volume down if you've had enough of my voice. But you also, if it helps, just follow along. If I want to pause and try the rest yourself first, and then just check it with my answers. Okay, so we've got a equals 4xy plus x squared. What do we want to make the subject? They want us to make y the subject, which is right here. So I'd suggest subtract both sides by x squared first, just to leave you with 4xy. So let's do that. So subtract both sides by x squared. A minus x squared equals 4xy. So a minus x squared equals 4xy. So we've subtracted x squared from both sides. Now we want to get y by itself, so we need to just divide both sides by, have a think. That's right, 4x. So go a minus x squared over 4x equals y. Which is perfectly fine as an answer. You might find in their answers they like to swap it over. But both are correct. Don't think you necessarily have to do this. But if it's easier to correct your answers that way, then feel free to do that. Nice. So we keep balancing our equations, which is great. Next one, p equals I squared r. So p equals I squared r. You might notice that a lot of these are kind of derivative of scientific formulas. So we want to find r. So maybe that was a resistance in this case. Power equals current squared r. So 12. So what we're going to do is we just need to divide off I squared. That's easy enough because we want to make r the subject. So p divide by I squared equals r. So make sure you use uppercase I, uppercase R, uppercase P, because that's what was used in the question. Try to make it as clear as you possibly can. Again, you could swap it around and make it R equals P over I squared. No problem with that at all. Question 13. Y equals M brackets X minus A. They want us to make X a subject. So notice X minus A is all together in a bracket. So we need to divide off the M first. So divide both sides by M is our very first step. So Y divide by M equals X minus A. And because we've divided both sides by M, we don't need the brackets there anymore. And to get X by itself, a nice simple step, we just need to add A to both sides. So Y over M plus A equals X. Happy days. And have I used lowercase where I need it to? Yes, I hope that did. Yep, I did. Let's just check our answers. Oh, according to the answer sheet, we can write it like this, or we can swap it around, just like as I keep going on about. Y equals Y over M plus A. Okay, if you didn't swap it around, but they did. So we'll just do that too, to make it easier to correct. Now, same thing, we're back to like physics, distance, motion, mechanics formulas. V squared equals U squared plus 2AS. They want us to find the acceleration. So, what is this, number 14? Okay, good. So to find the acceleration, first of all, do we deal with the 2 and the S first? I think it's correct. No, we don't. We need to deal with the U squared first. We need to subtract it from both sides. So we need to write V squared minus U squared equals 2AS, because we've subtracted U squared from both sides. And now, to get the A by itself, we need to divide both sides by 2S. So go V squared minus U squared over 2S equals A. And then that one's finished. We've found the acceleration. So you could swap them around too. Feel free to definitely pause and check with the answer sheet as well. Remember the answer sheet's at the end of this lesson, if you flick it ahead a few pages. So, and when you check the answer sheet, you will find A equals V squared minus U squared over 2S. Fabulous. 15, A equals 4 pi R squared. That looks familiar. Where have you seen this in the previous year? Potentially last year. What do you think A stands for? The area. And 4 pi R squared is the surface area of a sphere. That's right. So surface area of a sphere is 4 pi R squared. They want us to make R the subject. So if you want, let's make R squared the subject to begin with. Because 4 pi is just a number. And we need to deal with the 4 pi before we deal with the square. So divide both sides by 4 pi is what I suggest you do as your first step. So divide both sides by 4 pi equals R squared. Fabulous. And then how do we deal with the square? That's right, we would square root that whole fraction. A over 4 pi equals R. And remember, when you take a square root, you can get a positive and a negative answer. And try to think, why in this context do I not write plus and minus? Like, why do I not do that? That's correct, because it's talking about a real life situation where we're talking about a sphere and we're calculating its radius. So, and in a sphere, we tend not to get a negative value for a radius, do we, in the real world? No, we don't. Okay, so that's that. You can, again, swap it over if you like. The square root A over 4 pi. If you didn't put the square root clearly over the entire fraction, you will probably be marked wrong. So please make sure you do put the square root over the entire fraction. And then we're on to our last one, I think. On the home stretch. Y equals x squared minus 9. So that's kind of like a formula for a circle. It looks kind of like a quadratic equation too, doesn't it? You might have like a difference of squares, that kind of thing. But anyway, back to here. All we need to do is make x the subject, so that's easy enough for us. So try to think, what would we need to deal with first? Would we deal with the square, or would we deal with the 9? Have a think. Correct. Using kind of like reverse bed maths, we would have to deal with the 9 first. And how do we deal with the 9? That's right, we need to add it to both sides. So y plus 9 equals x squared. Hooray! And then to get the x by itself, how do we deal with the square? We would need to square root both sides. Y plus 9 equals x. And again, in this case, I didn't put a plus and minus, but you could be justified in saying plus or minus. That's okay. Because at this point, you're not expected to see a context behind this. So that's okay if you don't see a context. But in their answers, they didn't bother to put the plus and minus. But we can if we want to, in this case, because it's not necessarily talking about a radius or anything like that. Okay, so 17. And again, you could have written x equals square root of y plus 9, which would also be correct. 17, x squared equals y squared plus z squared. We want to make y the subject. So we need to deal with, which one do we deal with first, the square or the z square? That's right, we deal with z, or on Australian, I should say z. I'm Australian. We need to deal with z squared. How do we deal with z squared? That's right, we need to subtract it from both sides. So let's go x squared minus z squared equals y squared. And then try to think, how do we deal with the square? That again is correct. We would need to go square root both sides. Z squared equals y. Again, you could have potentially put a plus and minus there if you wanted to. They didn't in the answers though. But in the answers, they do like to swap it around. Not necessarily wrong if you don't though. Next one, b equals abc, pretty easy one to finish off with. We want to make b the subject. So to make b the subject, we just notice it's a times b times c, so we need to deal off divide off ac. So just go v over ac, could make it more clearly a capital V. So make it really clear that's uppercase V and lowercase ac equals b. I almost exaggerated it there though. It's weird. Okay. V over AC equals B. That will do. So again, we can write B equals V over AC if you like. Fabulous. 19. So we seem to have a volume formula again. Volume equals 4 over 3 pi r cubed. I'm trying to think from previous years, maybe last year or the year before. That is a formula for the volume of what 3D shape? Have a think, have a think. Yes, it's a sphere. So that's a volume of a sphere formula. They want us to make the radius the subject. So do we deal with the cube first? Yeah, we don't. We would deal with 4 over 3 pi. But when you've got a fraction, it's a little bit awkward. So you might want to deal with the fraction first. So volume divided by 4 over 3 is the same as saying volume multiplied by 3 over 4. So because you would times by 3 and divide off the 4. So that's like saying 3v over 4 equals pi r cubed. So we've multiplied by 3 and we've divided off 4 from both sides. Then I would suggest deal with the pi next, because pi is just a number. So to deal with pi, you can just chuck it in with the the denominator. So to divide both sides by pi, we can rewrite it as 3v over 4 pi equals r cubed. Because when you divide by something, it tends to appear in a denominator, doesn't it? And then to find r by itself, we would cube root both sides. So r, I'm just going to go straight to doing this. Try to think, what am I missing so far? What am I missing in my answer? That's right, my little cube root. So when it's a square root, we don't need to write the square. When it's a cube root, we do. So maybe I'll just do that down here. R equals cube root 3v over 4 pi. That's pretty nifty. don't forget the little cube root sign. And the very last one, hooray, we're on to v squared equals u squared plus 2as again, and they want us to make u the subject. So do we deal with the square or the 2as first? That's correct, we deal with the 2as by subtracting it from both square sides. So we need to go v squared minus 2as equals u squared. And then to deal with the square, we just square root both sides. We're talking about velocity, acceleration, that kind of thing. So that's probably why they don't have a plus and a minus in their answers. Like they don't have that kind of thing going on. Remember, like, it is possible to have positive and negative answers. It's just this particular worksheet doesn't seem to like them. And sometimes it doesn't make sense in terms of the context. And so we seem to be at the end of the lesson now. And that was just a quick review of some basic transposition from last year. So thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing you again when we look at more difficult transposition in the next lesson. Over and out.